Want to start off this morning by sharing with you a little story. When I was 30, I was at my first congregation in Rockport, Mass, and I was going through a divorce. I guess it was 32. Anyway, I was going through a divorce, and I had to preach every weekend. I was super stressed all the time, and I kept getting strep infections, and then I'd get medicine for it. Then I'd get better, then I'd get sick again, then I'd get better. Anyway, through all of this, I went to go visit my husband, who now I'm married to. And while I was there, I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And so much so that I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't stand up straight, had a red rash running down my neck. My neck was all swollen. And so we went to the emergency room and we got there and they, put a camera down your nose and checking everything out. And they came in looking worried and they said, we're going to have to bring you into the OR because you have a strep pneumonia infection and your throat is about to close up. So the long and the short of it is I went into the ER. I had a tracheotomy put in and then I had surgery on my neck and then it wasn't getting better. And then anyway, point is I was in the ICU for a lot of time. And while there, in the middle of the night, I felt like I couldn't breathe for some reason. And it was really scary. And I felt like I was going to die, which is odd because I had, a vent actually making me breathe, but it didn't feel that way. So while the nurse went to get some, like anxiety medicine to help me out, I realized that honestly, it was like a full-blown panic attack that I was going to die. And as I'm getting myself all worked up about it, I realized if I died then, it didn't really matter because I had loved fiercely and I was loved. And that all that really mattered was that. That was enough. That was sufficient. I didn't have to believe I was going somewhere after, this life to somewhere else. And here's the thing. So this was the moment of my reckoning with belief, but it was more as well. It was like the marking of when I really became a humanist. Up until that time, my beliefs in humans as the agency of one's salvation and transformation was theory, was reason, was conjecture, really, perhaps even a little bit of a leap of faith. But it was there in the ICU, my humanism moved from an intellectual construct to a force that solidified itself deep inside of me. It became more than a theory, really, or an intellectual construct. It became part of me. And honestly, it is me, both intellect and heart woven together into my understanding of the world. And I tell you this because my sermon that I'm going to share with all of you today is on humanism and my faith in the abiding power of love between people, individuals, in groups, in community. And I know that when we gather together, some kind of magic happens between us. And not every week, not always, but more often than not, we can see each other truly and know we are bound to each other in a community that holds us and loves us. And that, friends, is indeed something to celebrate each week. I think it's one of the reasons that we come back to church over and over again. So welcome to our celebration of life today. I want to start off by this reading this morning by the Reverend Bill Schultz. Bill was the former president of the UUA. He's also been the former CEO of Amnesty International, and as well as the director of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. So I want to share with you this little reading that he has on humanism. Here it is. There's a lot of nonsense that passes for religion in the 21st century, as it has in all the preceding centuries. Religious humanism is willing to call a charlatan, and while reason is by no means the only vehicle of religious exploration, we abandon it altogether only at our peril. Where would we, who cherish the natural world, be without religious humanism's insistence that the world is a seamless garment and that we humans are part of the weaving? When the Unitarian Universalist principles revere the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part, they hark back actually to that fundamental humanist point that human beings are a part of nature and have emerged as a result of a continuous process. Or consider religious humanism's courageous faith that the future of the world is in human hands, not those of an angry God or inexorable fate. Humanism beckons us to believe that we can make a difference to history. This is the source of my own passion for social justice. In fact, human rights themselves, as articulated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, are grounded not in the callings of the divine or the imperatives of natural law, but in the common experience of human empathy transmogrified into a set of guidelines designed to affect a civilized world. Finally, what kind of people would Unitarian Universalists be without humanism's generous contention that the blessings of life are available to all of us, not just the chosen or the saved? And they appear not in the miraculous or extraordinary, but in the simple dress of the everyday. So there ends this morning's reading. I have a monster. My monster isn't a figment of my imagination or a hallucination or a pesky holdout from childhood I can't seem to shake. It is not a pet. Nope. My monster hangs out under my bed and pokes at me when I reread a paragraph because I don't get the argument immediately, or when I have to look up words like asymptotically or sophism and inimical. It whispers, I told you you weren't so smart. My monster mocks me with feli laughter when I try to make it through a lecture on existentialism or postmodern, pretty much anything. Its laughter gets haughty and sharp the more I try to articulate to a friend just what the heck the lecture was about. I'm like, it was on something about something, I say. My monster is the life of a party when I am in a conversation with academics who are either theologians or philosophers, especially those who live in that space where hegemony, epistemology, and eschatology show up in every other sentence. My monster and I hold the same theological foundation, the humanism that Reverend Schultz spoke of in my reading. It serves as the ground of our being. But it turns out each of us, my monster and me, lean into different sides of our dear humanism. I toward the humanism of the heart, it towards the humanism of the head. The reality is my monster and I have been going at it for a very long time. I fell in love with humanism when I was in high school, when I started going to the Unitarian Meeting House in Madison, Wisconsin. At the time, the minister there was Dr. and Reverend Max Gabler, who had this intellectual humanism through a caring, kind of enlivened sense of the world. He was a charming and witty and beguiling man who was 5'6", maybe with dress shoes on, and surely came out of the pages of an illustrated version of St. Nicholas. He could wink at you and make you feel, well, delighted to be alive, because he was delighted as well, just like St. Nick. See, the meeting house of my youth did not ask of me leaps of faith. Rather, it kind of asked me to align my values in accordance with age-old truths of loving my neighbor as myself. It didn't ask me to believe in a God who was seemingly capricious or willy-nilly. It didn't ask me to not ask questions. Instead, it told me curiosity is the blessed gift of the holy, and that somewhere within and besides others, answers can and do arise. In the end, wow, I had found home. I really did. My humanism is grounded in the idea that when the chips are down, I put my faith in human beings to pull me through. That it is humans who save and transform me over and over and over again. It is humans that have saved me from a selfish meism that can destroy my well-being and lead me to false idols. It is humans who have loved me so fiercely that I am brought back from despair and loneliness and isolation. They have cajoled me into my better self when at times I frankly don't even want to bother with the effort. They have challenged me to aspire to possibilities I fear unobtainable because they see something in me that I far too often can't see in myself. And yeah, I have maybe said this to you guys, but humans are the 4 Fs, right? We're fragile, we're flawed, we're effed up, and we're also fabulous. Humans can and do betray us. They let us down sometimes. I get that. But when invested in, when relational, they have brought me back to life more times than I can count. In fact, I did this experiment. I tried to write in 2 minutes all the people that had saved and transformed me in my life. And I put a timer on for 2 minutes and I came up with 27 people. I would have gotten more, but I have this friend with this very long Polish name that has like 4 consonants in it and about 18 vowels. And I slowed down because I couldn't get her name right. Anyway, the point is, nonetheless, right? In the end, in big and small ways, it is humans who have saved and transformed me. My humanism is rooted in loving humanity. I believe in people. I have faith that they can live out of their best selves, that with practice and in community, we can be mindful and participate in enhancing the human conditions for ourselves, others, and the planet. Okay, but here's the thing, right? That is not my monster's humanism. My monster's humanism is in intellectual prowess. My monster likes the world of the mind and doesn't really get the world of the heart or the spirit or the soul or the hands or the feet. My monster has the mental acuity to ward off sloppy thinking or supernatural claims about the universe that are mostly bunk. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say it. My monster is the old guard rational humanist who can take me down to nothing in about 10 seconds. Because indeed they can. And for years, my monster's humanism was what we offered in Unitarian Universalist churches. It was mostly the purview of men, white men with privilege, often who had gone to some kind of Ivy League school, and who reveled in the joy of banter and debate and of being right. And here's the thing. In the last number of years, though, I've known that type of humanism to dwindle, like significantly. Now, within our UU churches, there is a far greater kind of understanding that we can hold head and heart together, right? In our communities. And pretty much all of the churches I have served, but primarily First Unitarian of Rochester, where it was the last place I served as a called minister, was one of the large churches in our denomination. To me, we were a living, breathing example of humanism at its best. A humanism that was that inclusive, that left room for theists to kind of jump in and hold and love God without having to become non-theists themselves. Our humanism was that embracing. At least I thought it was, until a couple of years ago when I had this very weird exchange. And that's when my monster came out to play again and got on the phone. So when I was at First Unitarian, because we were a large church, we were considered leaders in the denomination, and because we were predominantly humanist, though large bull humanists, right, that I've just talked about, and because I'm a chick, I got asked to be part of a learning circle, an online learning circle with two Harvard humanist chaplains, two old guard humanists with considerable funding abilities, another community minister who was female, two leaders within the American humanist movement, and two ministers who were facilitators from the UUA. So on the phone, there were 6 men and 3 women. And the purpose of what these monthly calls were was to supposedly bring innovative leaders together to spark and inspire and cross-pollinate with each other. In short, figure out possible future collaborations together. So here's the thing, though, without really even knowing it, and when I least expected it, my monster showed up on the phone. And what threw me even more, really threw me, was that monster had gotten surprisingly younger. It was the young guys who shut out the female voices, men in their 30s. Basically, I got an intellectual browbeating. I'm not sure how else to explain it. So on the call, I said that the mission at First Unitarian was to heal spiritual disconnection by listening to your deepest voice, being open to life's gifts, and serving needs greater than your own. I said it's about listen, open, and serve, right? Our church was rooted in the belief that disconnection is evil. Disconnection from self and others, and the oneness of life. And I said, it's not really about belief. It doesn't matter if you are an atheist, agnostic, theist, Christian, Barnes and Nobleite, right? It matters if your beliefs are in service to connection, they are in. If they aren't, they're out. And it's that simple. But here's the thing, the monster was on the other end of the phone. My monster. I got interrupted over and over again. I was told my language was too flowery, too poetic, too blah, blah. I'm very precise with the language of the mind, one of them said. One of the Harvard men said our mission of being open to life's gifts wasn't his aesthetic, I believe he called it. Humanism is about reason, the mind, not a language of reverence or spirituality. So, it's me. I objected to that comment by saying that spirituality really has nothing to do with what you believe about believing in a God or not, but more to do with a state of consciousness. It's about being present, being in the now. Spirituality is just being mindful in your living and loving. Then one of them said, it's not about emotion. I want to get to something deeper, something more precise. He also said at one point, I don't believe theists and atheists can be together in one assembly. And I said, that's not true. I said, we are here at First Unitarian. At the time, it was the 3rd largest church in the denomination. We are humanist based with theists in the mix. I'm the senior minister and I'm an atheist. I'm a non-theist. But before I could even finish having that thought and expressing all of that, I was interrupted. Then someone made a comment about how they aren't broken and churches should stop talking about being broken and brokenness. It makes them feel vulnerable and not welcome, and it's too Christian. In the end, I lost my voice. I went silent. My monster was back in kind of a big, badass testosterone way. And at the end of the call, one of the women said as her takeaway, there's something in here about feminism and humanism that I can't put my finger on, but it's important. My monster had shut me up. Not only was my monster in the room, but my monster took over the room. So I've always chalked that up to a bad day, right? I needed bad TV, a glass of wine, and the ability to let go of my anger and my hurt. And it took me a while, but I got there, of course. Because when I had simmered down enough, a few things occurred to me. I realized this wasn't really about my internal struggle with a monster. I was still mad at the exclusionary rationalist men, but it opened something up for me. This monster isn't just my monster, it's our denomination's monster. At our worst, it can still plague us. Our movement is hungering to bring the heart in alignment with the head. But every time we get real close, inches away from alignment, we get belittled by the head and convinced we are going to abandon rationalism. Our head says, stop now, stop now. There's like this little backlash, this little panic attack that the heart's going to take over and overwhelm the head, that it will usurp reason and rational thought. But you know what? It won't, and it can't actually, for the very reason that Bill Schultz pointed out in the reading that I shared with you earlier. If we bring the heart in true alignment, we are still going to believe that the world is a seamless garment, right? And that we humans are part of that weaving. If we bring the heart in true alignment, we are still going to know that human beings are part of nature and have emerged as a result of like a continuous process in evolution. If we bring the heart in true alignment, we still have faith that the future of the earth is in our hands, not those of an angry God or inexorable fate. If we bring the heart in true alignment, we are still going to believe that the blessings of life are available to all of us, not to a chosen few or those who are saved. So that won't change. But what needs to change, actually, is a fundamental understanding that we can bring our vulnerability to church alongside our ability to contemplate and to think deeply. We can still admit we need help right alongside having a brilliant, reasoned idea. We can share our pain right alongside our rational deductions. Friends, we're so close. But I realized something. I think both sides feel vulnerable to the other. Both sides feel like they will be discounted or forgotten or usurped or belittled. But you know, I'm pretty convinced we can do both. We are, however, going to have to open up our understanding of humanism to a more pluralistic, contemporary, more embodied experience. Because in the end, my humanism doesn't look like the humanism of the 1950s, the one we are proud of from our heritage. But friends, this is a living tradition, right? A growing, evolving tradition. We have to all agree, people come to church vulnerable. They just do. If I asked you right now, and I were in that room with you, and I said to you, raise your hand if you don't feel vulnerable in any sense. If I did that and I was there, I don't think it's possible that any of you would have your hand in the air. Because we all come vulnerable, right? And that is a part of my humanism. Here's also what my humanism looks like. My humanism, atheism or non-theism, is rooted in deeds, not creeds. You can have the best thoughts in the world, the most reasoned thoughts in the world, but studies show, science actually shows, it is actually your behavior that influences your reason rather than the other way around. So if your intellectualism doesn't influence your living and loving, you're doing good without God, what use is it? My humanism, atheism, is rooted in the idea that as humanists, as Unitarian Universalists, we are part of a living tradition. one that cares about living well in this life rather than worrying about the next, right? But that doesn't mean that what is after this life doesn't freak the bejesus out of most people. After a couple of decades in the ministry, I've seen enough fear in people's eyes at the end of their life when they are close to death to know it can terrify people. And it is hard, I know, to fathom one's consciousness ending. So we often say it is up to each of us to decide for ourselves what it is that comes next after death, right? Yet often that answer isn't very satisfying to people. But I actually think we have an answer. I talked about this before, I think, with all of you guys, but I'm pretty convinced that our answer and what comforts and supports people at death is science. It is thermodynamics, it is physics, it's biology, it is evolution. We are always still connected, and we always have been. I got a tattoo on my arm actually after my dad died, and it says, "From stardust I arrived, to dust I shall return." That is science, actually, that keeps me grounded and somewhat less afraid of death. And you got to love that we are all connected, that the molecules we breathe in include argon, which was shared with the Buddha and Jesus and Eve in the garden. Yeah, science is our answer to soften the blow of annihilation and the abyss. My humanism and atheism is joyful. Our worship, right? We often call it a celebration of life. The neuroscience supports the notion that there is no such thing as pure reason. It actually, again, is the other way around. It is our emotions that influence our reason. Further, what is life but a ride of emotions with every transition and birth and death and joy and sorrow? My dear monster, when people die, when people you admire and adore die, your intellect, frankly, doesn't help worth squat. When your child is born with a birth defect, when your 25-year-old sister gets hit by a bus and turns into a quadriplegic, it is not your intellect that's going to help you through that. When two countries are arguing with one another and they need to find that place of connection in order to stop going to war, some of it is reason, absolutely. But I guarantee you, it is knowing they will have sons and daughters die just like their own. It is emotion. My humanism isn't rooted in laughter at others. It is rooted in humility. It is rooted in the idea that the human condition can be very funny, especially when we can laugh at ourselves. We can open up the experience of being human together. Humor actually connects us. Facts, not so much. Precision, not so much. Avoiding emotion, not so much. My humanism, atheism, is rooted in the cracked pot. I always wonder this, but I wonder what the fear is of saying you're broken, right? We're all broken in some way. We are not perfect. And what is that saying about any of us that we don't want to or can't look at our own brokenness? It's not as scary as we think, especially when we all doing it together. And yes, we should talk about brokenness because people are in pain about it. They think they should be all things to all people, that they can't fail, that they have to keep a stiff upper lip, that they can't let anyone see how fragile they feel or are, because if they do, they might not know how to keep going on. They have lost their job or their wife. They might not know how to keep going on. They might have lost their marriage or their dreams or their well-being or their health or their mental health or their hope or their compass for what is good and right. They've compromised their values, their beliefs, their ideals to fit in and to make it feel like they've made it. People are insecure, lonely, hurting, and lost. We're all broken. But my humanism says to that, so what? We are all in this together. That together we can be less lonely and less afraid, less disconnected. Together, in the company and love of one another, we can be made whole. Finally, my humanism is rooted in the body. It's rooted in the idea that to be human does not mean just having a brain or just being in the mind, right? It means I bring my hands and my feet to the table. I bring my heart. I bring my wholeness, all of it, so I can be whole. This is a soft way to end, but hopefully the most telling of my humanism. The heart and the head need to make room for the whole body, your body. So I want to share with you this little meditation written by my past director of religious education, Sheila Shu. She wrote this. Your curiosity began as lightning across the sky. Your very nerves and every thought, every signal, the descendants of explosions and cosmic firings. Your insight and movement, ancient energies that acted long before your smiling. You are the very stuff of stars. You are the dust left behind. You are a solar event. You are the keepers of time. Your sisters hold their place and shine the sky above you, and you, no less, have such light inside you to offer the world. Can you see that you are a child of the universe? And that is why you know the earth is turning and dawn is coming. The darkness you have known, now and forever behind you, gives way to light. Friends, we are almost there. We are so incredibly close. May we lay down our vulnerabilities, the musings of our heads alongside the longings of our heart, and finally stop using them as swords against each other. Together, may our head and heart come into alignment in service to our faith and to each other. May it be so. Amen. Let's end with these words today. Whatever we can do or dream we can do, let us begin it. Boldness has genius and power and magic in it. May we ever be bold in our living and in our loving. Amen. So good to be with you guys today.